It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome into another Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders. Alan, how are we feeling?
Feeling good, man. Feeling good. It's like a rainy day, a little cozy, like just chilling.
I don't know what's been going on with me. I've been sick. Yesterday was the worst day of me being sick. I don't know if people watching or listening to this could tell. I still don't feel great. I'm sure you could tell in my voice right now, but I definitely feel better than I did yesterday. Yesterday was miserable. I was telling Alan, like right after we got done recording, that was like my Jordan flu game. He had to carry me through it. So appreciate that. Anyways, we're gonna get into a lot of questions today. This is going to be I don't want to say like an AMA thing because we didn't put it out ahead of time. We always ask for questions, but this is going to be solely focused on really the YouTube community. But we do have one thing from Alan's Instagram as well that we have yet to get to that we want to bring up right here. And this comes from Len Gorney via Instagram. First off, I like to hear he said safe travels back to Pittsburgh. So this goes back a little bit, but glad that you got back safe. I have a couple of topics I'd like to hear your opinion on. Should the Steelers break the bank on T. Higgins, draft a tier 2 receiver like a Savion Williams or Isaiah Bond, let Pickens leave to get a compensatory? So this is actually, I don't know if he's looking in the future here, because he said let him leave and get compensatory picks. So we're looking down the line there if that's the case. Additionally, I'm a big fan of two players from Oregon, running back Jordan James, DT, Jamari Caldwell. Both of whom would be available later on, I would think. Also, let's throw Chris Godwin into the mix in terms of Steelers free agent wide receiver targets.
Yes, the Steelers should absolutely sign T. Higgins, draft Savion Williams in like the 3rd or 4th round, let George Pickens walk, and have their 2 giant receivers of the future for long term, 5 years each. And then you got Calvin Austin, Roman Wilson on the inside, sprinkle in a little Ben Skoranek or something. You got yourself maybe Nick Westbrook, Akine, and you got yourself a really good-looking wide receivers room. But that's not going to happen, at least the T. Higgins part. And then when you don't get the T. Higgins part, it starts to sort of all fall apart, right? Mentioned Chris Godwin. Yeah, Chris Godwin's out there. He's going to be a free agent. He's also 29, coming off a major injury, may not even be ready for the start of the season. And after T. Higgins gets either re-signed by Cincinnati or shepherded somewhere by Cincinnati or tagged by Cincinnati or whatever, Godwin is the belle of the ball. Because when you look at the rest of this free agent class, I mean, unless Davante Adams gets cut, nobody else is even really close. He's going to get a boatload of money. And do you really want to spend a boatload of money on a 29-year-old coming off major ankle surgery? I don't know. He was having a really good year, but I don't know.
Yeah.
And then it starts to get dicey, right? Like this, the wide receiver position is very hard to envision the Steelers coming out of the 25 offseason set. Like it just feels like that is a project that they haven't even really begun to work on yet.
In terms of, I know that this name wasn't mentioned here, so I'll mention it. I know we've mentioned it in the past, but specifically in this comment, it wasn't mentioned, and you didn't bring him up there. When I look at the free agent class, and this wouldn't preclude you from drafting a receiver, obviously, looking at age and what they still bring to the table, Darius Slayton's the guy that I keep coming back to, honestly, is the guy that I would want the team to sign in free agency. 28 years old, I think still showed that he had it last year with the Giants and not even getting the most out of him, obviously, within that passing offense. And I think another little like box that you can check is the Steelers always come back to guys that are productive against them. Darius Slayton has had 2 fantastic games against Pittsburgh the last 2 times that he's played them. Not only that, but we know that there was talk last year at the trade deadline before the Giants basically shut that down, said they didn't want to move him. So Darius Slayton's honestly the free agent wide receiver that I keep coming back to that I feel like we haven't brought up enough on here.
I think he's a very likely addition. I just don't really think he moves the needle for me. Like, he's okay. He had 500 yards this year, man. 570 yards as a wide receiver 1. I understand he had bad quarterback play, but like,
well, Malik Neighbors was there.
Sheesh. Yeah, I mean, I guess. Yeah, Malik Neighbors did take that role, I guess. But like, man, I don't know. Like, I think there's a lot to be afraid of when it comes to Darius Slayton. He doesn't catch a lot of his very many of his targets. And his drops were up this year. I don't know. I mean, he's better than most of the options out there. There just are not very many good options.
I just
morning rush. I do like Savion Williams and the idea of a dart throw wide receiver project. I think you could include Jaden Higgins in that. I think you could include Trey Harris in that. Where like there are guys in the later rounds of this draft that are not fully formed prospects, but that have some of the traits that would make you a number one wide receiver. And maybe you can get one of those guys to pan out for you. Savion Williams is one of those guys.
Yeah, I mean, there's just something about Savion Williams' game that I see a lot of his two, and maybe this is like a TCU thing where I just see a lot of Quentin Johnston, who Justin Herbert's doing.
There's a lot of Quentin Johnston there.
Justin Herbert's doing everything in his power to turn him into an NFL player, to his credit. Had his best year as a pro, certainly this year. I see a lot of him, and I see a lot of who was the Laviska Shenault, Jaguars second round selection in 2020. Those are the two players that I kind of see there. And yeah, I think it's
there are a lot of those guys. Hakeem Butler. There's been a number of those guys that kind of look the part more than they act the part, if you will. And yeah, you're taking a risk. Ty Felton from Maryland is another guy that's like in that realm that I think like has traits that you would look at and say, he kind of reminds me of like a Deontay George hybrid kind of. He has really interesting traits, not like a lot of these other, like Savion Williams is just huge. He's 6'5". Like some of these other guys are different, but like, yeah, I think that's absolutely something they need to do, kind of regardless of what they do in free agency, because no matter what, unless they somehow find a way to get T. Higgins or are the team to pay all that to Godwin, they're probably not getting that guy in free agency. There's nobody else like that. I mean, Davante Adams, I guess. Like, there's nobody else like in free agency.
And even if you look like around the trade market, some of the guys that we're talking about, obviously you're just, and you spent your morning rush talking about this. So I don't want to talk about this on here. You can go back and watch that. But like, you're just hoping if you acquire one of these aging guys, a Cooper Kupp, even like, Deebo Samuel's not that old, but obviously the year that he had last year, you're hoping for a bounce back. Like, that perfect player really isn't there. Whether it's in free agency or in the trade market for them. And a lot of people asking about the receivers, so let's just stick within that.
I mentioned Deebo. Go back to Jamari Caldwell real quick, because he shouted out from Oregon. Loved his game at the Senior Bowl. I think if the Steelers are looking to double dip at defensive line, he definitely could be a second time around guy. My only concern there is that he is very much like similar to what they have in Keanu Benton in a lot of ways to me, and like just not quite as good, so like maybe a little bit too repetitive to the roster. But yeah, I like him. I like him a lot. I would go back. Like, if you're looking to circle back and hit defensive line again, I would hit Jamari Caldwell again.
Yeah, that's what I was just saying. I think that's the important part to add there is you're talking about the double dipping, because like I think they got to add one earlier than that to that room, and I think that they will add one earlier than that.
Yeah, I mean, you can maybe get him in the 7th round. Like I think he's not highly rated, but I think he's pretty good.
Stephen 116th, we just mentioned Deebo and Kupp. Let's stick with those two names. Stephen 116th says, how long do you think they would wait to pull the trigger on a trade like that? Worry if they're banking on a T or somebody like that, they end up missing out on the market in general. Kind of reminds me of last offseason, obviously. We talked about the way that they kind of missed the mark with the entirety of the wide receiver market. Are we worried about that potentially happening again this year if they don't pull the trigger early?
Well, I don't think there's any reason to be worried, but like that is a thing. Like, they have to move quickly here. Now, you can talk to these teams about trades before the 10th of March. You can't talk to the free agents before the 10th of March. I don't think they're going to wait on T. Higgins. Like, they'll talk trades now. I don't think they're going to wait for free agency because they want to talk to T. Higgins and exclude themselves from being able to get a Deebo Samuel or a Cooper Kupp or a Tyler Lockett. We should bring him up today, or Christian Kirk. I mean, because here's the thing: T. Higgins and those guys are not the same. So, like, you could still go get T. Higgins, and that would be fine.
That would be pretty wild. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm all for it. But, like, okay, Matt, wait. I just thought of a scenario. Say that they make one of those trades, go and sign T. Higgins, and then still, like, end up, we talked about George Pickens, somehow convince him to play this year. Like, don't end up trading him. Convince him to just play at the last year of his contract. How different the receiver room would be in 2025 than 2024.
Or trade him and get the pick. I mean,
but I'm just saying, like, how wild.
Would you rather have, like, here's the thing. Would you rather have George and Deebo Samuel, or would you rather trade George and have Higgins and Lockett? Yeah. Like, I mean, I don't know. I think there's different ways you can do it. And the pick you'd be getting for George, whatever that is, probably third or something like that. So, yeah.
Let's talk about Tyler Lockett. Okay.
I don't think they're in a position where they're, because here's the real answer to this question. They need two wide receivers this offseason. And because they need two wide receivers this offseason, they don't have to either or things. They can both things. So they don't have to wait for something to happen to do something else. They can just do something. And then if something else good happens later, that's fine. Like, if they don't think they're going to get T. Higgins, they make a move for a wide receiver now, and then T. Higgins comes available later, they can just get T. Higgins, take wide receiver off their draft board, and call it a day. Like, it's fine.
Do they need, you said they need two receivers. I agree. Is that with the inclusion of a George Pickens trade? Or
no, they trade George, they need three.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, let's talk about, you brought up a name right there, Tyler Lockett. Another older receiver that could be included within the wide receiver market. He's 32 years old right now.
I feel like the entire Steelers wide receiver offseason is just Omar walking into the Pawn Stars pawn shop and being like, what I really need for this is a number one wide receiver. And Rick Harrison is like, best I've got is a 30-year-old slot guy. Like, that's all there is. It's just 30-something slot receivers. They're just falling off trees. You can have as many of those as you want.
Yeah.
But Tyler Lockett could be available.
32 years old, will turn 33 during week 3 or 4 of the season. Because it's in the back end of September, turning 33. But what do we make of Tyler Lockett, what he is as a player right now? I think very clearly you've seen him decline over the last couple of years there in Seattle. They seem to be ready to move on. They obviously have Jackson Smith and Jigba, who's kind of taken over his role already. What do we make of this?
Yeah, I mean, a player on a hard decline here as he enters his age 33 season. Had 1,000 yards in 2022, 894 in 23, 600 in 24. The targets declining was the first time in 7 years that he didn't have 100 targets this year. Clearly being squeezed out of that offense. He has a $17 million contract that is not guaranteed. The Seahawks are $13 million over the cap. You do not need to be a math genius to figure out what is going to happen here, and that Tyler Lockett is going to get cut, and the Seahawks are going to save that $17 million and get themselves cap compliant here in relatively short order. That's why I think there's some chatter about DK Metcalf being traded. It's silly. They don't need to trade him. They can fix their cap problems and their abundance of wide receiver problems by simply cutting Tyler Lockett. Now, should the Steelers want him? I don't know. I guess if they're going to bring Russ back, then maybe you try to tap into the chemistry those two already have. But if I have Justin Fields, the last thing I want is another slot receiver. This is the last thing I want.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not signing up for the Russell Wilson.
One that is not a good blocker either.
Yeah.
I mean, Tyler Lockett's tough, but he's older now and is not that big. Like, if I want a slot receiver, I want Deebo Samuel. Like, I don't want Tyler Lockett.
Yeah, I think I'm good on the Russ Tyler Lockett experience in 2025. I mean, you could probably talk me into that. And
would you rather Russ and Tyler Lockett or Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams?
Davante Adams.
There you go.
That was that. I almost finished saying it before you said Davante Adams because I knew where it was going. That's how quick.
Or Will Howard and Emeka Egbuka.
Oh man, All right. See, now you're just playing on my Ohio State fandom too. Like, this isn't fair. No, but I have no clue what to make of Will Howard, at least early on.
Yeah.
Anyways, more wide receiver talk. This is interesting from Brandon because he said, so if not this year, what year do you think the Steelers look to get a number one wide receiver? Pickens is more than likely not to get a second contract here. So what are they going to do at that point? Not a single one on the roster currently is number one material outside of Pickens. So as soon as he leaves, there's going to be a massive hole. Next year isn't going to be any easier to find one, especially if they are looking to draft a franchise quarterback in the first round in the 26th draft.
Okay, so the Eagles got A.J. Brown in 2022.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Outside of Barkley, he's pretty much the last thing they acquired that was, I guess, and Jalen Carter, like Nolan Smith. But those guys were just replacing older versions of themselves on that defensive line also. Like, they just got Jalen Carter and lost Fletcher Cox, right? Like, I would say that, like, A.J. Brown was, like, towards the end of this Eagles build. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what, like, Saquon was the final piece that was dropped in. A.J. Brown was the one that, like, took them from a playoff team to a contender. And then Saquon was the one that made
another
them a contender
way.
to a champion.
They traded for A.J. Brown 2 years after they drafted Jalen Hurts. Okay.
Yeah.
And they drafted Jalen Hurts after they drafted most of their starters on the offensive line. Now, they've changed over a couple now. The interior has turned over from their first Super Bowl team, Cam Jurgens and Landon Dickerson and Mekhi Becton in there now, where they had Kelsey and Seumalo and who's the other guard?
I don't know, actually. No, he was a good Brand. Is it Brandon something?
I can't remember.
Anyways, this is gonna bother me if I don't look it up though. So
look it up. Well, I'll keep talking while you do that. So they had the offensive line, they got the quarterback, and they drafted Davante Smith right after Hurts. I think the year after Hurts, he was their first round pick. And then they went and got A.J. Brown next. So, like, I think it's a bit premature for the Steelers to be freaking out about not having a wide receiver one and, like, doing something. That was a drastic trade. Like, they traded a lot to get A.J. Brown. And it was a good trade, but it was risky and it was drastic and it was big. I don't think the Steelers are at a point where they should feel that pressure to resolve the wide receiver situation. The big picture build is trenches out, and they're not done with the trenches yet. And so I think this is the part where they should keep taking some shots, the guys we talked about. Even you can try to bolster what you have to make the team that you're putting on the field as good as you can make it, adding guys like Deebo, Cooper Kupp, whatever. But I don't see the need to feel pressure to, like, oh my God, this team needs a wide receiver one right now. Like, they just don't. They just don't. They need a lot of other stuff before they get there.
Brandon Brooks, by the way, was the guard who, pretty decent himself, 3 straight All-Pro seasons. Yeah. Like, that team, man, just
the guy we couldn't remember on the Philly offensive line was a 3-time All-Pro.
And then he had to retire. Actually, Nate Herbig played because Brooks missed an entire season and then retired following that injury. So that's kind of how the Herbig Weidl thing came into fruition. Which, by the way, speaking of Andy Weidl, James Piekarski said, do you think the Eagles' domination means teams will come calling, trying to get Andy Weidl for the GM position, given, obviously he had a bit of a hand in building that roster as well?
And a pretty good Ravens team before that. Yeah, I mean, I'm a little surprised that Andy hasn't gotten more GM attention so far. I'm not quite sure why he hasn't. Steelers should just keep hoping that's the case. Someday that ship's going to come. You can, I don't know what the wager would be, but, like, Andy Weidl is going to be an NFL GM. I'm pretty much positive at some point in his life. So, yeah. I think it's important for the Steelers to get this thing built while they got him, because they probably won't have him forever. We talked about, when I was in Mobile, we talked about the idea of like, hey, maybe you try to find a way to like move Omar up, promote him to president or something, just so you keep Andy around.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, like you, I'm surprised. I mean, I'm not trying to take away from Sheldon White or anything like that, getting an interview with the Raiders. I thought it was going to be Andy Weidl getting some looks around the league, this offseason especially. But that's, I know that we touched on it briefly, the idea of moving him up. I certainly would be on board with it. And the important thing for me is not that I want to lose him. Absolutely not. I want to keep him in the organization for as long as we can. I think is to, again, I don't know, could somebody else be brought in that is looked at as like that ready-made replacement that kind of follows in the footsteps of him, that's already in the organization? Maybe that is there now.
But Joe Douglas, who was Andy Weidl in Philly before Andy Weidl in Philly, and who just got fired as the Jets GM. So like, there's other options out there if you want to continue the sort of, hey, following Howie Roseman's coattails around plan. There's
I think there's worse plans to be had.
Yeah.
So that would certainly be interesting. That name actually didn't even occur to me because I kind of forgot about that connection. But either way, like, I don't get me wrong. Again, I would rather keep Andy Weidl for his entire NFL tenure. I think he's fantastic, but we'll see how that goes. I expect there's going to be some competition there at some point. Zach Howe was hell-bent on getting this question to us, Alan. Not only did he mention it on the YouTube comments, but he also DM'd you on Instagram to make sure that we saw it. So Jalen Hurts, not looked at as a premier passer in this league. Is he really that much better than Justin Fields? People say you can't win a Super Bowl with Fields, but if you keep slowly improving, the Steelers keep building around him, is there really no chance that they could win with Fields? What are your thoughts?
Well, okay, kind of two questions there, right? Like, what's the difference between Hurts and Fields? And then, is there no chance the Steelers could win with Fields? The difference between Hurts and Fields is that Hurts doesn't turn the ball over. I mean, that's really the biggest difference. And I don't think it's like, I don't know that I would say that Jalen Hurts is significantly more accurate than Justin Fields. But he just does not turn the ball over. And Fields, until this season, had basically been like an unhinged turnover machine. And that's the biggest difference between those two players. I think Hurts is a little bigger, a little more physical in terms of the way he runs and the way he's able to handle like the tush-push play. And
he's got a super strong lower half. Yeah.
Being put at the bottom of a pile, seems a little more comfortable with that kind of thing. Fields is a little bit more of like it's like skinnier guys, a little bit more of a finesse runner for me than Hurts, who's kind of willing to take some hits. And I'm not saying that Fields is like unwilling. He's just not as thickly built. And so there's that. And then like, I think Jalen Hurts has shown a greater aptitude for absorbing an offense and making a scheme work. I'm not saying that Fields can't do that. And there's lots of people out there that will say, well, all Fields coordinators were incompetent, and that's largely correct. So like, it's not necessarily on him. It's just that Hurts has shown that and Fields has not. I'm not saying he's not capable of it. I'm just saying Hurts has done it and Fields hasn't.
Yeah. So it's interesting with the first thing, because I mean, you added that he didn't turn the football over this year when we did get a look at Justin Fields. I guess the caveat there is, can he play like himself? Because I think he was playing kind of handcuffed when he was playing for the Steelers, very much being given a backup quarterback role. Can he be himself while also being able to mitigate those turnovers? I think that's going to be something to watch should he be brought back into the fold. I think a big difference for me when I look at them, Justin also does throw a really nice deep ball. I think it's at the second level. I think you see a bit of a difference in terms of the accuracy between the two quarterbacks. And I think that there's a little bit better in terms of Jalen keeping his eyes downfield to make a play when he's out of the pocket, where it seems like if Justin goes outside of the pocket, it's pretty much a sure thing that he's going to run. So I think that those are just a couple of things that jump off the page to me.
Yeah. Now, the second part of the question, is it out of the realm of possibility that the Steelers could win with Justin Fields? No, not at all. Like, it's not likely, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. If you put Justin Fields on the Eagles, this is an interesting question. If you put Justin Fields on the Eagles, how much worse do you think they would be? Better yet, if the Eagles had not drafted Jalen Hurts and had instead drafted Justin Fields, and all this time Justin Fields had been on the Eagles, how much worse do you think the Eagles would be right now?
I mean, it's an impossible question to answer, right? Like it's fun to play these hypotheticals, but like, yeah, you really don't know. But again, I would be interested in seeing Justin within that offense just because of how much they want to run.
Yeah, like I don't think they would be that much worse.
I wouldn't pick them to win the Super Bowl, I don't think. But like still be in that conversation.
Like one of the better teams in the NFC, right?
Like, look at what they did to Washington. Like, they could have not passed the ball in that football game.
Look at what they did when Pickett and McKee played.
Yeah.
Like, and Fields is better than Pickett. Like, I feel pretty confident in saying that.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I don't think, like, so the Eagles are the best team in the NFL right now. If you switch quarterbacks, they're, like, maybe you might put them behind Detroit. Like, I still think they're the second best team in the NFC at worst.
Yeah, I agree.
So, like,
I agree.
Like, so you can clearly win a team. You can clearly build a team that gets you pretty far with Justin Fields. But the Steelers are very far from having that team. And it's sort of unlikely
and
to happen. Like, if they sign Fields to a 2-year contract, like, the Steelers are not going to have a 2024 Philadelphia Eagles level roster at any point in the next 2 years. I'm pretty sure about that.
And the difference here for me, unlike the Philadelphia Eagles, they play in the AFC, which automatically makes it tougher for them.
Yeah. 100%. You got to go and beat Mahomes, Burrow, Allen, Jackson, even Herbert. Like, it's tough. It's tough. Stroud now.
Yeah. I'm curious to see how he looks next year. I think that he'll bounce back, but let's go back to Stephen 116. This is interesting. You mentioned the all the slot receivers. I don't think that we touched on this. I know that we talked about it, you and I, but he said, shouldn't Roman Wilson make guys like Van Jefferson and Calvin Austin expendable this year? Chris Sims said last year that he thought Roman was the best route runner in the draft. I know that we get to see him this past year, but shouldn't he have a much bigger role in year 2 and kind of make those guys afterthoughts?
Well, as we've noted already in this draft cycle, people say a lot of dumb stuff around the draft. So don't necessarily be bookmarking things that national media people say around the draft as like absolute gospel.
Best route runner in the draft was Roman Wilson, not Marvin, not Malik, not Rome.
Yeah. I mean, come on, people. What are we doing here? I really hope that Roman Wilson makes Van Jefferson. Like, the thing about, like, Roman Wilson is never going to make Van Jefferson irrelevant, because Roman Wilson, I don't want to say never, is probably never going to make Van Jefferson relevant, because Roman Wilson is probably a slot receiver. He's small. He's never dealt with press. He's a good blocker. He's tough. He catches the ball, but, like, he's probably a slot receiver long term. That's probably his upside. There's Van Jefferson as an outside receiver, so he's probably never going to make Van Jefferson relevant. And Calvin Austin is, if those are your slot guys, that's a good pairing. You have a physical guy who is a little bit bigger, a better blocker, okay with contact, make some combat catches, good in the red zone, and then you got your speed demon, your guy who can open up space, your guy who can run reverses and gadgets, and he's your punt returner. Like, that's a real, like, the Steelers. That's why, like, when we're talking about the free agents, like, the slot receivers don't have any interest in me, because I think that's 2 good slot receivers. Not great, but good slot receivers. Now, the outside is where they have this year of George Pickens and crickets. Like, they got to come up with something out there. So, yeah, I think long term, Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin, although I should mention Calvin Austin also entering the last year of his contract. Yeah. I think those guys seem like a fine combination going forward.
I mean, also worth mentioning, Van Jefferson's not even under contract. I would be surprised if they brought him back when you consider the amount of wide receiver turnover they want to have, right? I mean,
I would really hope not.
That's got to be like break glass in case of emergency. Oh no!
You think the Steelers fan base is negative now? That press release drops, so we've re-signed Van Jefferson to a 2-year contract extension. Sweep the bridges.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's wrap up with one more wide receiver thing because we haven't talked about receivers in the draft that much yet. Matthew Kinney says, when it comes to receivers in the draft, who do y'all like the most for about where you would take them? I'm liking Ibuka in the first if he's there, but I also like Walter Nolan, so I would take a look at a Jaden Higgins type in the second round. Kind of reminds me of Martavis Bryant.
Yeah, Jaden Higgins is the receiver that, to me, makes the most sense for the Steelers, like where he's going to be drafted. And I like Ibuka, and I think he's a fine pick if that's the route they take at 21. I just think they're going to go defensive tackle. Alec Ayominor from Stanford is probably going to go ahead of the Steelers' second-round pick, but he's someone to keep an eye on. He's not as like just absolutely big as like Trey Harris or Higgins or Savion Williams, those guys we were talking about. He's more like 6'2", like kind of well-rounded receiver. I really like him. I think he probably goes in between the Steelers' first 2 picks, but I might trade up a little bit to get him. Jalen Royals from Utah State, player coming off an injury, looked great at the Senior Bowl, is another bigger slot guy. Not quite Deebo Samuel size, but like my concern is he's only like a little bit bigger than Roman Wilson. Like he's so like, how different is he than what they already have? I don't know, but he's someone that I like for where he's mocked right now, currently like somewhere at the end of the second round or beginning of the third round. I like him there. Ty Felton from Maryland is someone I really like down the board as well. He's generally kind of in the day 3, day 4 border. Ja'Cory Brooks from Louisville is like if someone painted you a picture of a number 1 wide receiver, is like, this is what it looks like. But then he drops like 1 out of every 5 easy passes. I love Ja'Cory Brooks. They got to work on some things with him, but he's being mocked in like round 7 in some places. And I think he's a really good player for there. So that's just some that like caught my eye. Jalen Lane from Virginia Tech isn't someone I was very familiar with. I thought he flashed at the Senior Bowl. So there's lots of options there if they want to pick a wide receiver kind of wherever in the draft.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned my guy Jalen Royals, and I'm not saying specifically for the Steelers, but I just like his game in general. Kyle Williams, who was you saw him at the Senior Bowl as well, Washington State. I thought he looked like one of the better route runners from the clips that I saw, and then I turned on the tape a little bit. I think he looked good. Yeah, I think he's smooth. So I really like him. I have no clue where he's gonna go. I'm hoping that he doesn't start to rise up the boards, because I know, like, again, you're just talking about where people have him on like big boards and stuff like that, but I've seen him as like wide receiver 22 to 25. So it should be quite down the board. Guys that I think are going to go earlier. I know we mentioned Trey Harris a little bit earlier, but like I think there's some question marks about him, but like just from a size profile, he seems like the ideal type of receiver that the Steelers would take. I know DBs mocked them, Matthew Golden recently.
I have thoughts about Matthew Golden. Should we go down that route right now?
Let's go down that route.
He has more upside than Ibuka, and so I understand why people want to take him. But like, if he had gotten hurt on Thanksgiving and entered the draft, he'd be a 6th-round pick. Like, the entirety of his draft stock is Texas's college football playoff run. And some of the earlier tape is just ugh. And there's like effort concerns there for me where like he just takes plays off. And look, this has been a thing for Texas wide receivers for a couple of years now. And you can almost like you can watch the tape and like watch them hating Quinn Ewers like on the like you can like watch their frustration with the quarterback through the tape. Like, on one hand, I get it. On the other hand, is that really what you want to see? I don't know. I'm hesitant. I would not draft him at 21 if I was the Steelers.
Yeah, I haven't dug into him too much, but like just with what you're talking about, I think is certainly a concern. Like, multiple 100-yard games, but they were in the college football playoff. Not only that, like the 1 year of production. I mean, when he was a player, no, I'm not saying 1 year production, but like completely changed his role. At Houston was just running verticals. Like that's all he was doing, was just running vertical, playing the entire time, and they were finding him ways to get the ball that way. Now he expanded his route tree more at Texas, and they asked him to do different things and stuff like that. But again, you're talking about just this past season that was the case. So not only was it just the end of the season where he really became productive. It's also like 1 year at Texas that you're talking about really being the case.
Yeah, he's a guy.
Which players are allowed to get better. So, like,
he's a guy that I think should have gone back, because if he had another year like those last 4 games, he'd be like a top 5 pick. Like, he has that much talent.
Yeah,
but I'm just unsure about the player.
And the thing is too, if they don't take him at 21, like if they really like him, if they don't take him at 21, they're not getting him. So,
yeah, now maybe I guess like a trade back, I could get on board with. Move down to like 28, 30, somewhere in that range. I could feel better about it there. But yeah, I don't know. I would be very hesitant about making that pick. Like Buka, on the other hand, does not have the upside, but I would be like perfectly like that is the easiest draft pick, because I have no concerns about that player at all. Like, you know exactly
the buy-in. Yeah,
you know exactly.
He's been okay with never being the primary guy at Ohio State. Like, yeah, you know what you're getting for sure in terms of him. So I like it. Last thing I wanted to mention, I always like last year I did that top 50 wide receivers big board. Just going through and watching some of these guys early, I'm going to have trouble getting 50 receivers out of this. Not that it was easy last year, but like, man, my 50th wide receiver might be on this podcast right now. That's all.
Let me throw you a bottom of the 50 board. And I've got 2. Actually, may I have 3? I don't know. I don't know where these guys are. Obviously, I've not done any research about the 50, but Jamal Pritchett from South Alabama got the like, hey, you're from South Alabama, call up to the Senior Bowl after somebody else backed out. Like,
yeah,
you know, that because he's local and easy to get. He actually looked pretty good. There were multiple times where I was like, who was that? Oh, okay, maybe. All right. So that's one. And the other one was just like, I don't even care if he's not good, but the Memphis wide receiver, I've done zero research, but his name is Rock Taylor.
Yeah.
And I just the name itself gets him on the board in my mind.
Also, this board that I just had pulled up just to look at names, I tell you right now, their 59th receiver is going to be way higher than that for me. Kanata Mupfield out of Pitt.
Oh yeah, he's way higher than that. He had a really good week at the Shrine Bowl. People were raving about him.
Yeah. All right, let's get out of here. Alan, tell the people
from Tennessee is another guy there on name.
We're just gonna keep naming receivers. We're gonna be down to like top 100 instead of top 50.
I'm down.
Anyways, we're not gonna do that today, but maybe on tomorrow's episode. Until we get there, though, Alan, tell the people they can find you.
At @Saunders_PGH on X, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. PGH Steelers Now is the site's account. SteelersNow.com. Go there, read the words so I can get paid. Thank you for liking our YouTube channel. We have 15,000 plus subscribers. Keep doing that. If you haven't, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications, and you will never miss an episode. Steelers Morning Rush, Steelers Afternoon Drive, all the good stuff we got here. Draft profiles coming out, things of that nature. And keep those questions coming, man. This time of year, it's the lifeblood. What would we have talked about today without question? You know what we were going to talk about? Here was the big story, the big piece of news at SteelersNow.com today. Steelers preseason legend Tevin Jones has signed with the Calgary Stampeders of the CFL.
Tevin Jones in the Market District would have dominated the conversation today.
Tevin Jones is 32 now. If that made you feel old.
Jeez, it does. I didn't need that to make me feel old, but also, I'm trying to think. We have 15,026 subscribers. I was trying to think of a random 26. 26 hasn't been too bad to the Steelers. I feel like I'm trying to go through some names here. I mean,
Woodson, Deshae Townsend. Are you looking for the bad
one? That's what I'm saying. An obscure Steeler, and it's a pretty good history. The names that at least pop in my mind.
Will Allen, is he 26?
Well, he might have worn 26 at one point. He was definitely 20 in his last stint.
Oh, I got Mark Barron.
Oh God, yeah, yep. And see, that was after Lev.
There you go.
Mark Barron. There you go. That's what we're at right now. 15.
Oh, Anthony McFarland too. Anthony McFarland. That's a good one.
Oh God, yeah. If the only thing that counted was OTAs and training camp, Anthony McFarland would have a gold jacket.
God, Anthony McFarland.
He would have a gold jacket right now. Anyways, Also, if you're listening somewhere else, Apple, Spotify, wherever your podcast from, be sure to leave us a 5-star review, subscribe over there, all that good stuff. And then you can find me everywhere, Zachary Smith, PGH. For Alan Saunders and myself, thanks for jumping in. Take another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.